So the exciting thing we got to hear about today is something maybe people didn't expect from ESRI. This is open source ESRI, right? You're opening up the code to folks, in a way?
In a way. We have always provided our software to conservation NGOs around the world, and we have maybe 5,000 of them, but there's like 1 million NGOs in the world. So the thought was, gee, none of them have access to our software, and we spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year in building core software. Why can't that platform be available for NGOs of all types? And particularly this meshes with the Gov 2.0 initiative and open government, where data is being made available. Okay, then what do we use with that data? How do we really visualize it? How do we analyze it? And geography and maps are, as you and I have talked about, worth 1 million words. If I spatialize and see things, I can really see things much better on a map. So that's the initiative, is how can we empower the NGO community to get more actively engaged in government, to be really good citizens. So this program is all of our software, our servers and our desktops, to NGOs that allow them to build their own data or get government data or be more active participants. And I'd like to say this idea was my idea, but actually Ralph Nader, when he spoke at our users conference, God, it's been like 15 years ago, said, Jack, this is your weak point, is you're doing really great work, you're really helping government do good things, but you know, ultimately it's going to come to citizens need to get involved in this and actually examine the data and examine the storytelling that's coming out of government. So he suggested that. And then over the years we've made our software easier. That is, putting it up on the web and having, you know, web browser access and iPhone access and those sorts of things. This is very powerful because people can reach back to the services that are coming out of government, and government can serve them more effectively. But the other point of view on this is that the raw data being made available should also be able to be examined by these same kind of powerful tools. And because we're a private company, we really don't care what people think so much about it. So we said, let's just jump out and do this. What I said this morning is that it's kind of interesting, because we say, well, why don't we make our software available to everyone in the world? Free. I'd like to do that, but then I've got thousands of developers that are going to starve. So we said, okay, why don't we make it available to everybody except those organizations like businesses and government who actually can pay, and it's built in and part of their normal work. And we deliver lots of value in that space, and people can afford and do pay for it, and it's very popular. But how about the rest of the community? Why don't we just open it up and say, people that are working on rescue missions or in education or in citizen activism, they should all be availed with these same powerful tools. And that's what this program is about.
So this is one of those really key issues in terms of thinking through how to make open data make sense to people.
Yes.
And maps are an incredibly powerful tool for that. They help you visualize the distributions of health indicators, of all kinds of tie-ins, the famous food deserts around cities if you start to mash up information. The data itself that you suck into those, in many cases, would be open government data, free and public to all. When organizations put their own data into, sometimes into software, there are other ownership issues. How, as we work with nonprofits on that count?
Well, we do not get engaged in any of our web stuff, web mapping, in any ownership or proprietary issues with respect to government's data or anybody else's data. I know that is a real bone of contention in the so-called web mapping, that somebody puts their data on a consumer mapping site and boop, they no longer have full ownership of that data. And that's not us. We're not interested in that. What we're basically good at is building technology that allow people to analyze and use and visualize data. So we're staying clear of that issue. We have built an interesting website called arcgis.com, and this is basically for our users to register their map services and load their data into a cloud environment. And other users can search that cloud environment and find somebody's web service or map service or data set or application. So we have lots of open source developers who are building on top of our platform, and they're sharing their apps, kind of like the Apple iPhone app, but these are geospatial apps that are generic to our platforms. And you know, we have something like 300,000 customers, actually user organizations in the world, which is a lot of customers, millions of users. And they build neat data, but they also build neat apps. So this sharing environment allows them to share it. I thought of one other thing I wanted to mention, which is when we talk about using maps for open data, open government, one way to do it is to download some data and have some tools, like software tools that you can analyze, and that's what this NGO program is all about. The other way is that an agency sets up a map server or a geo server, and they pour their data into it, and they serve out maps that are well authored or tell a story. And for many citizens, they don't want to fool around with the data and the maps, and they just want to look at the news. They want to see, I like to use the analogy of the weather map. Okay, that's a weather map. But I'd like to see the poverty map, and I'd like to see the agricultural productivity or the unemployment map. And who can best do that? It's the government agencies themselves who can take the raw data, which ought to be made available as well under Program 1, but create these highly interesting communicating maps. And so that's what I say, we need to move beyond data sharing to map sharing. So these maps can also be mashed up or overlaid. So I could look at something like breast cancer on Long Island, which is an anomaly, and another map service, which might be environmental contamination, and overlay them or look at them side by side. Or this morning we showed obesity, diabetes, and poverty rates, and we looked at these three maps side by side, and we're able to pan and zoom and query one and see the relationship. This is the integration of multiple services from multiple agencies. And that's not simply, look, that's not data.gov, that's understanding.gov, right? Because that's what people want. They don't want to fool around with all the technology. I mean, some people do, and some need to. But what they really want to do is get the news. And again, I'll say it, a map is worth not 1,000 words like a photograph or a picture, but 1,000,000 words, because you intuitively see it, you look at the relationships and patterns on the map, you look at this one compared to that one, and we are comparative animals, you know, that's how we're wired, and we can create understanding. And in Saul Werman's words, Richard Werman's words, understanding precedes action. So to the extent that we can bring out this kind of geospatial information, it's going to change the way we not only understand things, like what's happening with global warming, what's happening with obesity, what's happening with any public policy issue, but it also stimulates action. Not unlike most of us now know that it's a stupid thing to smoke. You know, we used to be programmed that it wasn't that way. But we understand cancer, we know that it kills you. So I'm hoping that this geospatial visualization has the same power and same impact as on global warming. If we only understood what the hell we were doing with respect to the human footprint on the landscape, then we would figure out how to change it. And so I like to think about geospatial consciousness. In other words, being able to account and see through visualization the way we're wired, what's really happening in the world, so we can actually stand up as individual citizens or as social groups or as states, cities, countries, and one global society, and actually make a difference.
It's geospatial consciousness. That's a phrase that could ring in a lot of ways. I mean, I think about the relationship of data to information and then to knowledge, and then assuming that people are willing to listen to wisdom.
Yes.
The discussion around the oil spill live cam was actually directly upon this this issue. There was no call to action. If you're seeing that, well, what do you do when you're watching this? And there were thousands upon thousands of people watching. If you see the relationship between food scarcity, nutrition issues, obesity, and the concentration of farmers markets and quality grocery stores, then there's actually a policy decision that could
Exactly
result.
right.
And now there's actually increasingly this interest from NASA and NOAA to offer data of climate services. They're just going to be releasing more data sets on that. And it strikes me that that could be integrated into these maps in a way that might show progression over time and help to drive policy.
Absolutely right.
How could you integrate calls to action into mapping? Would you consider bringing in other features, other nonprofits, other things that would allow people to do something when they saw it?
You know, you're scratching the surface of many, many different areas. And as you're talking, my mind is just going crazy. One of the initiatives that I'm very fond of is called Geodesign. My original training was as a landscape architect and planner. And we used to make maps and we'd overlay them and we'd try to interpret the landscape. What is the landscape telling us? And then design on top of that with a pencil and a pen and a marker. We tried to interpret geography. With GIS today, we're getting all of these different data sets coming at us, and we can overlay them, and we can now do sketching on top of it on the web. I like to call it geodesign. In other words, we can interpret these data either through models or just visualization and create a plan. And that takes the science of geography, observational science, modeling science, and pipelines it right into people who actually design things. You say, well, I'm not a designer. That's for creative people. That's not true. You know, farmers are geodesigners. They lay out their patterns. Military guys lay out military geodesign. Private companies like Starbucks and McDonald's and Target, they all do geodesign. And the way they do it is they sketch out a plan and they quickly evaluate the consequences of that plan. And that's what GIS is all about. So we are evolving in this geo-consciousness world and extending beyond it to build tools that allow us to quickly check out alternative scenarios and quickly understand what the footprint would be if we did this plan or that plan. And that calls for geo-accounting, accounting for things that people actually care about, like biodiversity, like health, like livable cities, like creating a better future. So my goal with GIS is not simply to automate all the maps, to model how everything works. It's to link that to the creative design process of human beings so that they can take this information and create a better world. And that's going to be incremental. People will have to get used to this kind of geospatial thinking and bringing science into how they think. But it's going to happen very quickly.
I'm noticing more and more in my cohort, my generation. I'm Gen XY, right between the millennials and the Xers. And there's fascinating similarities and differences, but we're in a geosocial world all of a sudden, where we can see each other in time and space in a virtual way.
Yes.
And when we experience something, we can share it both in real time and in right time. We can actually put our experience into such a place where somebody else can then take it and spread it somewhere else. When people in nonprofits or other organizations create maps, will they be able to share it with their friends and then to really drive that kind of geosocial awareness?
Right. There's two dimensions to what you're saying. First, everything's becoming real time. So geography's being wired up so that we're measuring everything that changes in real time and feeding it into networks. Some of that is sensor networks. Some of it is observational platforms like weather or stationary drones that watch things going on. Another dimension of it is social, crowdsourcing, social media. That's all being georeferenced now. Things like Yoshihide and Twitter, they've all added geospatial content or tags to their observational data. So those, for me, are just other layers. Volunteer geographic information is what I like to call it, or VGI. It's just transacting on these layers, and those layers in a GIS setting can interact with other layers. So this is what people are saying over here from Twitter and Yoshihide about what's going on with the oil spill. And this is real, by the way. And those feeds were brought right into the sort of operations center down on the Gulf, and they were used to dispatch things like where the booms should go. GIS was a big player. It's an underrated story in the Gulf. It really, I think, made a huge difference in being able to locate booms, place skimmers, and it was using social media information as well as observational information coming from radar and so on to help guide that. But at a broader scale, social information, or we in geography call it cultural geography, is playing a very active role, and the fact that that's becoming more and more real-time gets me very excited, because we can connect with each other through these maps and transactions of data sharing in emergencies, like in Haiti and in Chile and right now in southern New Zealand. We're building these common operating pictures that bring in imagery and maps and real-time measurements and all of it together, and then put it out on the web. And the other thing you said was, can a sort of non-GIS person really get involved? The tools are now very simple to do this. They can bring in these different web services, they can mash them up, they can put some of their own annotation, web links to it, and then republish that map out, send it, email it, share it with some friends. So there's a new language emerging. Mm-hmm. It's a geospatial language. Maps are a set of symbols, just like our written languages or like music languages or other forms of communication. But maps are really powerful because they're quantitative, visual, analytic, and now shareable.